everyone, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to Fiberflex Knitting. Today we're going to be making this beautiful roll edge knit cowl. This is so easy and just one stitch used, and I can't wait to show you how to make it. So I really wanted to try to make the easiest cowl ever. This is made with just knit stitches, and we're going to use just one yarn cake. So all the fun gradient color work that you see here will be done for you, and it's just knit stitches. Now knit stitches in the round tend to want to curl. So we're going to kind of use that to our advantage and let it curl and make like this beautiful rolled edge on both the top and the bottom. So we're going to go through the whole thing step by step and stitch by stitch. Now before we get started, be sure and hit the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiberflex knitting updates. I share full project tutorials like this one, stitch tutorials, techniques, and so much more. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, be sure and hit it and get all the latest Fiberflex knitting updates. So you can find the full written pattern to this on the Fiberflex blog. We're going to go through the whole thing step by step and stitch by stitch here on the channel. And you can also get the ad-free pattern PDFs over in my Etsy shop and my Ravelry shops as well. So let's jump in, grab your yarn cake, and make this gorgeous roll edge knit cowl. We're going to be knitting this in the round, so there's going to be no seaming required. It's just going to be a nice seamless tube that we'll be creating. And I'm going to use an ombre cake, one cake of ombre yarn, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But it really shows off these colors beautifully for this particular cowl. It's like a very pale icy blue down here at the bottom, just almost white, it's so light. And then it transitions into this gorgeous kind of inky navy blue at the top. So I really love this particular yarn for this pattern. We're going to be knitting all the stitches of every round, so it's very, very easy. I'm going to show you how to do everything, every step of the way. And then when you work stockinette stitch in the round, which is this stitch, where you have the iconic V's on one side and then the little wiggly stitches on the other side. When you do stockinette in the round or flat, it wants to naturally curl a little bit. So when it curls, we're going to use that design element to our advantage and just gives it this lovely edge. It's just very easygoing, kind of relaxing pattern with no special stitches required and no seaming, etc. Now this cowl has a nice slouchy kind of generous fit. The height, if we unroll this edge a little bit, is about 13 inches tall, and the circumference is about 44 inches around. Now you can adjust that a little bit, and we're going to talk about that later on in the video, but you can work more or less rounds to change the height of it, and you can cast on more or less stitches to change the circumference of the cowl. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle to weave in the ends. A tape measure is super helpful, especially if you want to customize the sizing a little bit. We'll talk about that later on in the video. You'll need a stitch marker just to mark the beginning and end of each round. And for our yarn, we're going to be using one cake of Lion Brand's Mandala Gradient. I have the steel blue colorway here. It starts off as a very pale blue and works its way out to a very, very dark blue. Lovely coloring. And each cake of this, I'm going to use one cake of this. Each cake of this is 295 yards. And if you're looking to substitute yarn, just look for a medium 4 on the yarn weight scale. And again, 295 yards of that. For our needles, now this one recommends a 4mm needle. We're going to go up a couple of sizes just because I want it to have a little bit more drape and open it up a little bit more. I have here a set of 24-inch US 9 5.5mm circular knitting needles. These I went a little bit bigger, so if you open them up you can see they're nice and wide to accommodate the cowl that we're going to be making. Okay, so a pair of those, and then for our yarn, 295 yards of this number 4 medium yarn. So let's jump in and cast on our stitches next. Our cowl has no special stitch count. We're just going to be knitting all the stitches. It's so super easy. But we're going to cast on a total of 155 stitches. You can adjust that however you want. We talked about the sizing a little bit at the beginning of the video, so if you want to go smaller, cast on less stitches. If you want it to be larger, cast on more stitches. But we're going to cast on 155 stitches. So I am going to have my stitch marker handy. I'm going to go ahead and close my stitch marker. And we're going to be using the long tail cast on. Now I have a video that details that if you want to watch it more in depth, if you're just starting out with knitting, you can check it out up here in the corner and watch that in more detail. But I'm going to kind of go through it, sort of breeze through it. So we're going to estimate our yarn. The long tail cast on has you estimate yarn because you're making a long tail. So what we're going to do is do 3 wingspans. And what I mean is we're going to grab the yarn in one hand, pull it across the front of us to our other hand on the other side. That's 1 wingspan. And then we're going to do 2, and then we're going to do 3. And that should give us plenty of yarn to cast on our stitches. Again, we're casting on 155 stitches. So what we want to do to begin is put a slip knot on our needle. Wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop. Bring the yarn behind that loop. Then we're going to grab one of our needles, doesn't matter which one, they're connected. Reach in with our needle, bring up that loop, and then just kind of snug it up against the needle, just like that. Next, we're going to cast on the rest of our stitches. So this actually counts as one of our stitches. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our index finger and our thumb, and this is the yarn that's connected to our yarn cake over here. This is the working yarn. And then we have our other yarn that's kind of coming towards us. This is the tail that we estimated. So we're going to take our thumb and our index finger and come in through the bottom of this. It's kind of like an upside down V right now. And we're going to grab it from the bottom with our pinky, and then we're going to kind of open it up with our fingers. And then to do the cast on, again, I have a more detailed video if you want to watch it slowly. You're going to take your needle and you're going to come up under your thumb, around your index finger, and then through that thumb loop, and then gently tighten it up against your needle. You don't want to go too tight because we are going to have to knit back into these stitches in a little bit. So we're just going to repeat that until we have 155 stitches on our circular needle, okay? So go around, around, and through, around, around, and through, around, around, and through. And just keep going until you have the number of stitches required. And I'm going to keep going with mine. And when we rejoin, we'll have all of our stitches cast on and we'll start our first round. 154 and 155. Okay, so you can see we have all these stitches now on our circular needles. So the next thing we need to do is join. So joining is easy, but we need to make sure that we don't twist our work. So I just wanted to point out too, we have our tail. I have a little extra. I always like to give myself a little extra when I'm doing the long tail cast on. If it kind of bothers you and it's floating around, you can trim it back a little bit, but just leave yourself enough to weave in later. Okay, so now we're ready to join our work. And what I like to do is just kind of lay everything down flat, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that our work is not twisted. If it's twisted, it's going to create like a Mobius or a twist in our work. We want like a column or a cylinder shape. Okay, we don't want to twist. Sometimes some projects you might want that, but this one we definitely do not. So we're just going to kind of scoot our yarn out of the way. And what I like to do is lay it down flat, and we just want to make sure, if you can see this like sort of twisted edge that we have here, that's the work. That's what's going to grow into our cowl. We just want to make sure that everything is laying nice and flat and that nothing is twisted. We don't want some of this to be on the outside and the inside. We want it to all face the same way. So grab your stitch marker, because we're going to place our stitch marker. And our little tail that we had, we're just going to kind of scoot it out of the way, and then our working yarn is going to go back here. So put your stitch marker on your needle here, and then grab your yarn, and then double check it one more time. Just make sure nothing is twisted. And we're going to knit our first stitch. And I'm going to come in a little bit so you can see better. We're going to take our needle and we're going to slide our work towards the edge of the needle here. And again, just make sure nothing is twisted. I always check this a bunch of times before I start knitting, because that very first stitch is what kind of sets the tone for the rest of your piece. So we're just going to insert our needle, and knit the stitch. If you're not familiar with the knit stitch, just wrap the yarn around that bottom needle, and then we're going to bring the needle from the back to the front, picking up that loop, and then just push it off. And that's it. So all we're going to do for round one is the only round for this whole cowl. It's so super easy. So for round one, we're just knitting all the stitches, okay? So just start knitting all the way around. And if you're working in the round like this with a pair of circular needles, sometimes what you'll need to do is kind of push your work around and slide it around as you're working. And that's totally normal. So if you feel like it's pulling a little bit, you might need to come back here and sort of push your work up a little bit, okay? So let's continue around knitting all the stitches, and when we rejoin towards the end of this round, I'll show you how to transition to the next round, and then we'll just do that for the rest of our project. Okay, just working the last few stitches of the round here. There's just a few more. And then once you get to the end of the round, now that the first round or two, I just wanted to say as a side note, this tail that we have, just give it a little tug in the beginning like that because it might be a little bit loose. But once you get to your stitch marker here, what we're going to do is just pass the stitch marker from one needle to the other and then just keep knitting. And that's it. That's all you're going to do. So you're just going to repeat round one, and I'm just going to give it a little tug just to make sure everything's nice and snug. Okay, and then all you're going to do is just keep knitting each round over and over and over again until your cowl is as tall as you would like it to be. Now I'm going to keep going until my yarn cake runs out of yarn because I want to go through all these gradient colors, and we're still at the very, very pale blue. It's almost white, it's so pale. But I'm going to keep going with our yarn. What you'll want to do is just save just a little bit of yarn to bind off, okay? So just keep going, repeating round one, knitting all of those stitches, saving yourself a little bit of yarn for the end, and what's going to happen is your edge here, now it's so short now it's hard to see, but your edge that you're knitting here is going to start curling. It'll curl a little bit at the bottom because this knitting all the rounds, when you're knitting in the round, it makes those iconic V's. Now when you're knitting flat, it looks different because you're turning your work, but we're just making rounds here, so it'll start curling in on itself. So if it does that, that's part of the look that we're after. So you'll know that that's part of it, but just keep knitting all your rounds. And when we rejoin, the cowl is going to be a little bit taller. We're going to have just a little bit of yarn left, and I'm going to show you how to finish up your project. So keep going and save yourself a little bit of yarn to bind off, and we'll rejoin in just a minute. Okay, we're just working the very last stitch of the row like this. And now we're back at our stitch marker. So I worked from this edge, and you can see how beautifully it's curling. It just gives it such a nice, fun little edge. And I worked all the way up until we've gotten to this darker blue area, and now we're ready to bind off. I just have a little bit of yarn here. I've saved enough, just enough to bind off. So let's bind off, and then we'll do some measurements, okay? So we're going to do a basic bind off. Now, if you're not familiar with the basic bind off, it's very easy. I'm going to walk you through it, but if you want a more in-depth video, I do have a video for that. You can see it up here in the corner. So for our basic bind off, all we're going to do is we're going to knit one stitch, then we're going to knit another stitch. Then we're going to take our left needle and we're going to go in to this first stitch that we knitted, and we're going to go in with our needle and we're going to lift it up, over, and off of our right needle, just like that. Then we're just going to keep repeating that step. So knit the next stitch. Now lift it up, over, and off. Knit another stitch. Lift it up, over, and off. Just like that. And we're just going to repeat this step all the way around until the project is fully off of our needles. Now you can see now we have where we've bound off, we have a little bit of an edge, a gap here where we've done that. So that'll continue to increase as we bind off more stitches. So just keep repeating that same step, and it might get a little snug on your needles, but just kind of slide it around the best you can. But we're just going to knit a stitch, Then we're going to lift that stitch up, over, and off, knit another stitch, lift that stitch behind it up, over, and off, and so forth. And we're going to do that until there's no more stitches left to bind off, okay? And we're just going to do that until we have just one stitch left on our needle, and then we'll rejoin, and I'm going to show you what to do next, okay? So you can see it's starting to come off the needles. All right, I'm just knitting this very last stitch here, and now I have two, and we're going to just lift that last one up, over, and off, and then there's just one stitch left on our needle here. So what we're going to do to finish this up is just cut a tail, and then carefully, now I like to kind of pinch underneath just to kind of give myself a little bit of extra, just in case something, the needle were to fall out or something like that. But just kind of hold it in place, loosen up that loop there, remove your needle. Now take your tail and just send it through that loop. This is your last active stitch, so you want to just be really careful and then just sort of like slide that knot down, securing it into place, okay? So our cowl is complete, except we just need to weave in some ends. So let's do that. But before we do that, I just wanted to show you how pretty this looks. Actually, we can zoom out so you can see that. But it has just this beautiful ombre look, and you can wear it with like the darker color up top, or you could flip it and make it so that the lighter color is on top. It's totally up to you. And both sides roll very nicely, or you could kind of unroll them a little bit, but they naturally want to curl, and we're kind of using that as our design element. So what we want to do is turn your cowl inside out. And if you used one cake of yarn like I did, you'll have just two tails. You may have more if you switched colors. But we're just going to thread our needle. And again, this is an ombre look, so when we weave in our yarn ends, what we want to do is just stay in this general area of the color of your tail. You don't want to go too far into this blue because it'll really show. So we're just going to sort of weave in this, and we're going to go in these back stitches here. And we're just going to go in one direction with our tail, and then just come back in the other direction with our tail. Just trying to get in these back loops here. Keep it nice and neat. And I like to go in two directions like this because it will help lock the tail into place. Anything you're wearing is going to move around a lot, and that will help it just, you know, keep it all where it needs to be. All right, and then you can just repeat for your other tail as well. Now, once your tails are woven in, you can turn your cowl right side out, and it just looks so pretty. So I just wanted to also mention the dimensions again. This is a height of 13 inches, and now because it rolls, the edge rolls, it will be a little bit shorter, but if we unroll it, it's about 13 inches. And then the circumference of this is about 44 inches, so it has a nice sort of slouchy feel to it. And our cowl is complete, and that is how you knit an easy ombre knit cowl. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiberflux knitting updates. Happy knitting, everyone!